Oh, we're live.
Hey, hold on one second. I just got to take us live on Instagram. And we are off and running, sir. Hey, Adam.
Hey, how are you, Robin?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Boy, winter really kicked in recently, huh?
Yeah, big time.
You're not a snow person, though, are you?
No, I am most definitely not a snow person, and I don't like to even acknowledge that it snowed or go outside usually in the first couple snows and just stay inside and pretend like it's not happening. But yeah, it's happening, and it's too soon. It's too much too soon for me.
I love the snow. Bring it on. It's funny. My wife and I, when we first met and started dating, we lived in a warm climate. And we ended up moving back here because this is where I'm from. But we thought if we had to disclose where we wanted to live before we got married, that's the way everything in our marriage is symbiotico except the climate. I want to go to cold. She wants to be on a beach somewhere, but
tough. It's tough to reconcile. You got to do a lot of vacations.
I guess that's right. That's right. Yeah. The problem is I want a vacation on a mountain and somewhere, and she wants a vacation on a beach. Right. But anyway.
Well, maybe you should just send me with her to the beach to keep her company, and then you can go do your
mountain. Go do my mountaineering skiing.
Yeah. Okay, so listen, we have a lot to talk about, and we have a couple of really great guests too coming on. So should we start with the city council recap?
Sure.
Because there was a marathon city council meeting on Tuesday. It was super long, and one of the reasons for the length of the meeting was they started
real quick. Hey, before we get into that, I just want to acknowledge something that happened in the meeting that I thought was great. That it was something my father and Sonny Bonaccio really pushed for. There's a park over on the west side. It's a little pocket park there off of Division, and Commissioner Tom McTighe, who had recently passed away, Commissioner McTighe and his family have been involved in Saratoga, and I didn't know this since 1918. His great grandfather was a judge in the city. And it was a really special moment. Commissioner McTighe he was a Democrat in Saratoga when it wasn't cool to be a Democrat. I don't know that our politics would align now, but he was part of the founding people who made the city great. So I thought that was a really neat acknowledgement. I'm glad the city council voted 5-0 to name the little park after him and his family. And so, a little shout out to the McTighe family and all they've done for the city. But going back to what made
that was going to be part of my recap. I was just going in order. No, I thought that was a really wonderful and touching moment, and so appropriate, and just a nice moment to kind of think about the history of the city and all the contributions people like the McTighes have made to create what we enjoy today. So it was very cool.
All right, on to the good stuff.
On to the good stuff. So the city council meeting started off with another public hearing to talk about the short-term rental legislation that has been drafted and modified over the last 10 months, I'm going to say 10 or 11 months by Commissioner Moran. And I have to say, I can't recall the last time I've seen this many people show up. This is now the second meeting in a row to speak at a public hearing. I mean, the hallway last week or this Tuesday and 2 Tuesdays ago was packed with people. They were sitting on the ground waiting. They had well over an hour of public comment of people coming up. And it just, people feel very passionately about this issue because it will have real life impact on a lot of people the second it's passed. And so I wanted to kind of talk about some of the things that people brought up as their concerns and kind of where it stands right now. I know you listened to this public hearing too. Some of the things that jumped out at me were, first of all, the one thing that I can't really get around, the limit on the number of days that you can rent. I think it's 130 or 150 days you can rent. And it just feels very anti our capitalist economy to tell people that they can only rent their house for this many days and that's it. I don't know how you get around that, but I don't think it's great.
Yeah, the two questions I have about that. Number one is that theoretically, everybody's going to rent their house out for summer, right? So Saratoga doesn't have plenty of people in summer. Don't we want people coming in the winter? The winter is when the restaurants are sitting empty, the bars are sitting empty, the shops are slower. So why would we kind of discourage renters from coming outside of the summertime, because people are going to use those days? But the other question I get, and maybe I'm judging from the people, but I in full disclosure, I'm in the short-term rental business, the long-term rental business, and the hotel business in the city, right? So there's no, you can say I don't have a horse in the game, or I have every horse in the game.
You have all the horses. I have no horses.
I have all the horses. But who is coming? How many Airbnb? If you're renting your place $150, that's a lot of nights to rent your place, and it appears people are, right? Because you're not the only person who picked up on this. A lot of people had issues with this 150 days. But I would say, boy, how many people are coming to Saratoga in January, where people are renting their house out for those 150 days? Well, and B, why don't we want them coming in January if they want to come?
We do. And I think there's people who rent out for the summer during the track, and then have people who are here for the school year, whether they're Skidmore students or people who have just moved here and are looking for a home, and they're looking for something from September to June.
I don't think that does not count against your 150 days. I forget what the length is. Might be 30 days or something. But once it becomes a long-term rental, those days don't count against your 150.
Oh, I gotcha. Okay. All right.
Right. So you could rent it out for the summer, then turn it and rent it for Skidmore students, and that Skidmore rental would not count against. At least that's my understanding. So it was more people who were just the straight Airbnbs. Right. Now, it comes down to the issue I have with this is not an issue, but this is something everybody agrees on. We need regulation. And kudos to Commissioner Moran for taking something on. He took it, I think, a little over. He overstepped what I think is needed, but we should be able to come to an agreement here, because this is something. You have people whose neighborhoods that are being upended and uprooted due to these absentee landlords.
And I get that, but I feel like that's an issue that can be addressed with our zoning regulations and defining a short-term rental or a secondary investment property being rented out with short-term rentals, as we can define it in the UDO and address it in how our zoning works. But I agree with you that we all think there should be some kind of regulation. The problem is everyone thinks different things should be regulated, and the goal has gotten really blurry. It started off as a pitch about safety, and then it pivoted into a pitch about, this is going to bring down this is going to make more affordable housing and bring down housing prices. And then it just keeps kind of twisting and turning. But what I was hearing from a lot of people was just a lot of fear and sometimes panic, because there are a lot of people here who have purchased properties and made the numbers work based on doing short-term rentals all year round. And so suddenly they're like, wait a minute, you're telling me that I'm going to lose half the year. I can't make the numbers work if I can't fill it for, the full year or whatever.
Yeah. And not making the numbers work when you have a mortgage can be scary, right?
Yeah.
It's not making the numbers work. I'm not going to do this. I'm going to close my business. Not making the numbers work, meaning I got to pay X amount each month in mortgage payments and insurance payments. If I'm not bringing it in, that's a serious problem. So I'm conscious of that.
I also thought that as they talk through the process of how you would get your kind of license, it seems like it's fairly onerous. I mean, you have to have multiple inspections, the costs, there's little costs for each thing, and they all add up to about $1,200 to go through the whole process and get permission.
Right. So the way it was laid out is the licensing fee might be only $200 and we're talking for one residence, but then you have to have a fire inspection. That's I forgot.
I think that was $200.
Yeah, $200. Then you have to have a chimney inspection. And all the
septic tank inspected. You have to. Yeah, there's a whole laundry list.
Septic tank inspection, and for me, again, Saratoga has had a long history of renting out the houses. The business model has changed, but the core business has not. Mm-hmm. And thus far, we've had zero, as far as I know, zero tourists killed in home fires or zero septic tanks that have backed up and destroyed a city street in the illustrious 150 years that Saratogians have been renting out their home. So again, I agree with what we're trying to do, because there are, I think one of the interesting things and I've kind of learned this, when you have two sides on an issue, the latter side will take over the city council meeting, right? So you saw that with like BLM, right? BLM would take over the city council meeting. And so people like who were not anti-BLM, but against the message and what they were saying would stop showing up because they would be shouted down. I think you saw a little of that at this city council meeting where it was, I think maybe, out of the 20 people who spoke, one person was for this complete regulation that was being proposed. And the rest were for some kind of regulation, but not what was being proposed. I don't know that's indicative of if you put it to a vote. I think it's just the short term, the people whose livelihood, like you say, we're talking about,
were affected by it in one way or another. Yeah.
Yep.
And the other thing that I picked up on was there were moments where people were asking about very specific things, and Commissioner Moran would respond saying like, yes, you take my word for it, that will happen. You have my word. And that is like a troubling statement to me, because like having like a city council member's word that they're going to do something means absolutely nothing.
Right.
Absolutely nothing.
Right. Especially not that it's his word, but the fact of once this becomes enshrined in law. So that's why I get nervous when they say, well, the fine, if they're writing it in there, the fine, the initial fine is up to $2,500. Yeah. And you have the commissioner now, and I believe when he says it, that's not the intent. The intent is not to go start digging people $2,500. Who's not to say the next commissioner is not going to do that? Who's not going to say the code enforcement officer is not going to do that? So it has to be memorialized in the regulation exactly how this is going to happen. And it's too well, we just want the most stringent. We want to side on the side of the government being able to come in anytime they want and fine you absorbent amounts. That's what we're going to put in the rule, but we'll change. We won't really enforce it. I think it makes people nervous.
Yeah, no kidding. And I also think that like this is obviously like a very dense and detailed piece of legislation, and we're asking a lot of the public to keep, like, there were so many people there who were like, hi, you know me, I've been here before, because they've had to keep up with all these changes and track them and stay on top of it. And these agenda items don't get published until the day before the meeting. And so then there's like a rush to figure out what's been changed, what hasn't been changed. They say they're going to publish FAQs, but they haven't been published. And ultimately, there was supposed to be a vote on it on Tuesday. The vote was pulled. And there was no vote. They kept the public hearing open. Commissioner Moran said repeatedly, though, that they were going to vote on it in 2 weeks at the next meeting, which I thought was crazy. Like, I don't know how you could do that, considering the level of concern that was being raised about so many varying points. But then afterwards, after the meeting concluded, Commissioner Moran said, I believe to CBS 6, that now they're actually going to wait for the state legislation to pass before they vote on this legislation, which is totally contradictory to what he said in the meeting. As I watched that whole long meeting. So it's all very confusing. And I wouldn't have touched it with a 10-foot pole. I don't know where you go with it. I don't have anything to offer in terms of the solution.
Yeah, this is what I think the solution is. Again, because I think the Commissioner Moran, the head's in the right spot here with what we're trying to do. But instead of trying to start from the top down and get everything you think should be in there, start from the bottom. Start with the registry. Start with the registry. Start making sure that the city's getting occupancy tax payments and the county's getting occupancy tax payments for it.
Can we just pause on the point for a second?
Yeah.
That's a really good point, because they discussed the fact that none of the occupancy tax that the people who are coming here and paying for Airbnbs, none of that tax money comes back to the city until the county votes on it, and then the state votes on having a carve out for Saratoga Springs. So there's a huge cost that's incurred on the city's end to have this process in place, like the amount of manpower it's going to take to, do all these inspections, the people who are going to be in City Hall processing all these applications. There could be 800 to 1,000 applications coming in, and they want to have this in place by June 1st. So the cost on the city side is significant. And I think they're trying to offset that with all these fees. But at the end of the day, we still don't have the occupancy tax coming in. So like, it just doesn't make sense to me. I think it's a little bit of a shit show.
Yeah. I again, I would say start with the registry. Start with a path to get occupancy tax in. Start with instead of requiring. I mean, this was another. We talk. You mentioned the safety issue. The state says the law is it has to be inspected once every 3 years. The city's proposing once a year. To date, to rent your house out for August, nobody's ever gotten their house inspected. Start with something where on this registry, if you want to rent your house out, these are what just give the homeowner, especially if it's owner occupied, right? Because this is my family staying in here. I don't like the fact code enforcement could show up within 24 hours notice. Start with something saying, listen, you need a fire, these are the things you need, and you're going to certify that you have these things. Because again, I understand the safety issue, and it's kind of it's a tough when you're arguing. I mean, you can say safety for everything, right? You can say, hey, nobody should ever drive their car again. There'll be no more car accidents for safety reasons, and technically you'd be right. But I understand the safety argument. But having code enforcement come in once a year, the fire department come into my personal house once a year, for me, it just doesn't. It's a complete government overstep, and the conservative side of me. The less government the issue. I understand the safety issue, but that can be achieved with a checklist that I sign saying I've done these things.
But also the language for like what has to be up to code is very broad. It just says like everything on your property has to be up to current code standards. And for so many of us who live in houses like my house, which was built in 1885, I don't excuse my language, but I don't fucking know if what's up to code and what's not up to code in my 1885
tell you probably a lot's not up to. Yeah,
I'm right. Sure there's not a lot.
That was another issue where people were saying, listen, in this not legislation, but in this legislation that you want to pass about STRs, it says the house has to be up to code. You're saying it has to be code at the time of being built. But that's not what's written down. What's written down in the legislation is it has to be up to code. So there were a lot of people that kind of goes back to trust me, this isn't what it says, but this is what it means. Well, again, we might trust you, but we might not trust the next commissioner of accounts or the next code enforcement guy to come in and say, hey, your home was built 150 years ago. But a light socket you have is, you got to go change every light socket, every outlet. You got to make this door 6 inches wider, and you got to build a ramp in the back of your house to be ADA compliant.
Yeah. And then you have to have like a diagram of the egress plan, like hotels have, like on the back of the door. We have a comment here from John Kaufman who says, how can there be a vote at the next council meeting when Moran says the legislation at the state must be resolved before the local law can be finished? Yeah, there was a lot of seemingly contradictory and kind of incongruous statements that were made, and it all just leads to more confusion on the public side, which is unfortunate. Adam, we have Mike Brandi here, and I'd really love to bring him in to weigh in on this topic, and then I know we have a couple other things to talk to him about, so let me get him in here. Hey, Mike, can you hear me? Oh, I can't hear you.
Real quick. Mike Brandi is the head of. He is a citizen in Saratoga. There we go. Citizen, but he's also the head of the City Republican Party. So, Mike Brandi, nice to have you.
Yes.
Good to see you guys. Thanks for having me on. Sorry, just like champing at the bit, hearing you guys talk about STRs to jump in on some stuff. I was taking notes.
Yeah, come on in. Tell us what you think. What's your read?
Well, I've been through this 12-page behemoth of a proposed law a number of times, trying to figure it out. And I've drafted these things. I've drafted, I represent municipalities. I've done that for 10 years. And this one is pretty wild. We're talking about the people that are in favor of regulation, the people that don't want regulation, people being in favor of this ordinance. I think a lot of the people that are in favor of regulation don't necessarily understand what this ordinance is and how really unenforceable this is going to be. I mean, Adam, to your point early on, you were talking about the 150-day limit, and that's a limit for short-term rentals, but not for long-term. Well, if you read the law, it says it's for everything. it says a primary residence may be leased a total of 150 days within a calendar year. It doesn't say short term. It doesn't say long term. It just says 150. So whether that's the intent or not, whether there's a wink and a nod and a trust me kind of thing, this is unacceptable. This cannot pass. And that's just a small example. You've got Moran and the council saying, well, the criminality has been removed. It hasn't. The code enforcement officer is expressly authorized in this to issue appearance tickets and to seek fines. That's in the penal law. So that's a criminal element to this. This whole thing is supposed to be based on fire code. Well, fire code doesn't apply to single family residential homes. It never has, and it doesn't. So this thing is so off base. I think, Adam, you're probably spot on that. You really got to pare it down, have some goals, and then legislate towards those goals versus this kind of throw it all at the wall kind of approach here, which is just not going to be working. It's a shame. They could pass this, and it's not going to be enforceable. It's not going to make anybody happy. So,
well, we were just saying, I'm totally confused now about when they're voting on it, because I swear Commissioner Moran said like multiple times that they were going to vote on it in 2 weeks at the next council meeting. But then after that, he said they're going to wait for the state to pass their legislation until they vote on this. And I'm like, wait, what? So
interesting. Yeah. I understand, through the grapevine that potentially Assemblywoman Warner, might have spoken to him. There might have been some meeting about the intent of the state law and the impact of the state law. Personally, my 2 cents, I think it makes absolute sense to wait for the state, see what the state's going to do, because the state might take a lot of this out of the city's wheelhouse. They might do a lot of this free of charge.
I was just going to say, like, there could be things that are duplicative, and there also could be things that are contradictory. So, why are we spinning our wheels and setting ourselves up for, a situation where we have to deal with all the issues that, come up with state legislation? I also did hear through the grapevine, so to speak, that Commissioner Moran's representation of Assemblywoman Warner's position on this legislation and her support for it maybe was a bit exaggerated on the commissioner's end, and she might not have been thrilled with how she was being represented in terms of her opinion on this. But it's again, I wouldn't have touched this with the 10-foot pole. I think there's so many landmines. But I will say, it seems like a weird comparison, but at the end of the meeting, Commissioner Songvi brought up the issue of salaries for the city council and raising the salaries, because it's $14,500. It's $220 a week. It's like $8 an hour. It's ridiculous. And she also was talking about charter change. But instead of saying like, we have to change everything, and in that we'll address the salary issue, she pulled out the salary issue. She suggested a raise to $25,000 for the city council members, and she's proposing a vote just on that in 2 weeks. And so to me, that's kind of like the approach that needs to be taken here that Adam's describing. Don't take on changing the entire form of government and looping in the salaries. Pick off something that gets the ball rolling, that makes sense to people, that's easy to understand, that everyone thinks is reasonable, and start there and then build. But
sure, yeah, it's like using a sledgehammer when you just need a claw hammer or something. It's a blunt instrument, and I think that's a good example. I mean, we have a lot of the complaints you hear from people that want STR regulation is parties and noise. And I live around Skidmore Kids and STR rentals, and it's rarely for me, just because they're smaller STRs, rarely for me are the STRs issues, but I could see where the bigger houses could be issues. I have issues a couple times a year with Skidmore Kids being loud, and sometimes you got to call the police. They come, they shut the party down, and then you move on. But I could understand people are frustrated. If it's happening every week for the entire summer, that's frustrating. But we got to be able to empower the police to respond and to write our. We have noise ordinances. Noise ordinances are.
I was just going to say, we have things already that are in our city government that address these issues. Code enforcement will come out, they're on duty late night on the weekends, and they have, like decibel readers for noise. And if there's a noise complaint, they can come out and take the reading and address it.
They're hard to enforce, but they're not impossible to enforce. And where you have a person who's a regular complainant who has an ongoing issue with a particular house, they can respond. The other thing that they can do is these people have, if these houses are really bad, they have private rights of action. They can, go after their neighbor for essentially being a private nuisance to their property. And these are things that they can do. Granted, you got to get a lawyer, and that's expensive, but nothing's going to get someone's attention, faster than something like that. So there are mechanisms to remedy a lot of these issues that already exist. I think we got to kind of try that before we do whatever this is.
There's also this 1-800 number that would be set up that I find to be like, again, a little contradictory to the way in which our city works, because it would be, I mean, my understanding is it's essentially a 1-800 number for people to like call and rat out their neighbors for renting.
Here's the issue with an anonymous. I mean, first of all, if you want to do a complaint, you can call up police dispatch and leave your name off if you witness a crime or there's a noise. You don't have to. They'll ask you for your name, but you can just say I'd rather not leave it, and you won't leave it, and the police will respond like they would for anything. And as far as so if you're not looking the criminal route and you're just calling to snitch on someone, so to speak, for a violation of this ordinance, they're not going to be able to enforce it based on an anonymous complaint. There's due process considerations. You're issuing a license here. You cannot take away a license without due process. And an anonymous complaint is not going to fly. You've got a right to confront your accusers on something like that. And it's just going to be, again, this is not thought through legislation. That's just another example of the mess that it's going to cause.
I'm also thinking about how Chief Dyer, interim Chief Dyer, acting Chief Dyer, I'm not sure how we're characterizing him. He you apply for, he was talking about how the fire department was still understaffed and doesn't have enough people. And that's with the, code enforcement department that they have right now. That's at max capacity basically. So how many more bodies are we going to need to do these inspections, to process the paperwork? It has to go through multiple departments. I just think it sounds like a potential fucking nightmare.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the ways you get around that is to lessen the burden. When you go to register your car in New York, it's every 2 years. Not every year, it's every 2 years. Because if it was every year, maybe the state could get a little more money, but the administrative burden would overweigh it. So why do we need safety inspections every year? What exactly is changing? Is the battery dying in your smoke detector that we need to have an inspection to go do that? Why can't we just do an affidavit certification? Why can't it be a license every 2 years or 3 years or 5 years? What's the point of doing this every year? It's a huge burden.
And that was Chief Dyer tried to explain that based on the state standards, but it didn't.
Right. So that's a misunderstanding that unfortunately comes out of that department, and they've had this misunderstanding from the beginning. I pulled up the fire code. I looked at it. It didn't make sense to me that it applies to single family dwellings, regardless of the use. So I emailed state code, and they maintain the code. They're professional engineers. They gave me an opinion that said, no, the fire code does not apply to single family residences, regardless of how it's being rented out or the term that it's being rented out. There is no provision in the fire code that applies the fire code to these rentals. And that's one of the issues here all along. It's just something gets repeated enough times, people start to believe it. This, right. Go back to the assertion that STRs are illegal in Saratoga Springs right now, and this legalizes now. Utterly false. Absolutely false. And it doesn't even take a legal mind to read this in the code to realize that is just a misunderstanding, and it was repeated over and over again to the point where people just assumed it was true. So a lot of the foundational reasons for us doing this legislation have been debunked, and I think people are so far down the rabbit hole that it's hard for them to come back. Yeah, I quite agree.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because that was a big part of about the fire inspection, which again, something I'm pretty against. I think it's very it's an intrusion by the government to come into your home, and the idea of having to do and I understand the fire chief. When you're a hammer, everything's a nail, right? So if you're the fire chief, you're going to see potential fire hazards everywhere you go, and you're going to want to rectify them. Two, it's fire. I don't know that maybe fire chiefs want to hire more firemen, and then maybe this is an avenue to say, listen, now we got to do all these inspections. But again, I think it is an overstep to. I think 3 years is an overstep. So since it's here, that's not actually the code that you're able to legally rent your house out without a fire inspection.
I want to point out again that Adam has all the horses in this race with all of his multiple rentals. I have nothing to rent. I don't rent out my own home. It would be time to clean.
Yeah. If anybody wants a nice home this summer, I can show it.
Yeah.
At the end of the podcast, I'll walk around my house. I'll show it to you.
Yeah. Well, Mike, while we have you here, we're kind of bearing the lead here with you coming on. And what I'm referring to is that yesterday, news broke that Dillon Moran, the Commissioner of Accounts, was being charged with you will know the technical term more than I will, because I was kind of confused if it was criminal or not criminal.
Yeah,
but basically, sorry, go ahead.
It 3 counts of violation of penal law. I believe it's 240.65 or 265.40. But the name of the section is unlawful prevention of public access to records. It's a violation. So there's violations, misdemeanors, and felonies. Violations are the lowest class there. Similar disorderly conduct, trespass, those kind of things are what are termed as non-criminal violations. So the prosecutor under the penal law, the violations of penal law, and they're heard in criminal court, but they don't carry things like a criminal record. You're not arrested and mugshotted. And the maximum penalty is 15 days in jail and or $250 fine versus a misdemeanor, which could be up to a year in jail and $1,000 fine, and a felony obviously above that. So it's a violation essentially.
But so thank you for explaining that, because I think it is a bit confusing. But to me, the larger issue here is that what he's being accused of doing is you had put in some FOIL requests for various issues that had been discussed at length at city council meetings. And then we're told that no documents existed pertaining to those issues. And Commissioner Moran certified that statement. And perjury and all those things apply when you're signing these kind of official certifications that indeed no documents exist pertaining to these subject matters. And that's not the case. And I don't know how much you can comment on this because I know it's pending, but I just have to say that what jumped out at me is Commissioner Moran obviously knows you're an attorney. He knows that you're very familiar with the FOIL process. You understand the ins and outs of what has to be done and how it needs to be done to be legal, and what the city's responsibilities are. And yet he still kind of, it appears to me, was pretty flagrant and saying, no, nothing exists about issues that clearly there's documents that exist that pertain to, like, short-term rentals, for example. And then there was also a text message exchange that was publicized where Commissioner Moran is saying to someone, text me on this phone number. It's my personal phone and not subject to FOIL. So basically, right, like, if we want to smack talk or talk about controversial anything, text me on this number because it's not going to be, the public will never see it. Yeah. And I just find all of that deeply troubling, because if he is doing that to someone who, again, is going to know that this is a potential violation of the law, and, it can be investigated by the sheriff's department, and all these things can happen, how is like he responding to the average citizen who doesn't have the wherewithal that you have? And it seems to me that this kind of behavior is not usually a one-off. There's usually it's indicative of a pattern usually.
It's a really valid concern. This is what you see, what's going on under the surface. And yeah, so you kind of preempt me there. Yeah, there's not much I can comment on as far as the actual nuts and bolts of this. It's obviously it's in court, it's in proceedings. So I'm not going to comment on the specifics of the case, but yeah, you're absolutely right. In FOIL, the city can withhold certain things. If they want to withhold certain things, what they do is they tell you, we're withholding something, and this is the reason we're withholding it. So you have the right to appeal or to go to court if you need to. But if they're saying they don't have anything, they're not saying they're withholding it or denying access. They're saying we don't have it. The only remedy a citizen has is to ask them to certify it. Say, okay, you're saying you don't have it. Well, put your money where your mouth is, certify it under perjury. And that's all you get as a citizen, is you get to take the government's word for it. So once you have that, you have the certification, and that's all you're going to get. So when, if a certification is false or not true, I think it's especially concerning because again, you don't have those rights you have with a denial to appeal and to get it in front of a judge. All you can do is just take it for what it's worth. So yeah, that's kind of the procedural context.
I just have to say, because of my own personal experience with FOIL and turning over documents, I, had a request, as most people know, from the Attorney General's office that essentially I turned over my personal cell phone. I turned over my entire phone
Mhm.
and thousands, every single text message, every single document. I turned over everything because to me, whether it's good, bad, or ugly, that's my responsibility. I don't have any other option.
It's similar but different, because I believe, if you would know better than me, but I believe that was in response to a subpoena from the AG's office,
yes.
right? So you would have had the ability to move for a protective order, or to try to quash it or limit it. Obviously that's fraught with its own issues and costs and time and going in front of a judge. So yeah, generally, with the subpoena, a lot of times people will just disclose because it's easier. FOIL's they can withhold a little more, because there are things they can withhold, interagency communications, stuff relating to law enforcement. There are things that you can validly withhold, and the Committee on Open Government is very clear on that.
But typically, the person who's receiving the FOIA requests and processing them, it's in the city attorney's office. So it would be a city attorney responding and saying, this, is not subject to FOIA because of these reasons, blah, blah, blah. And it wouldn't be the commissioners or the mayors deciding what is going to be released or not released.
Every municipality handles it a little differently. In Saratoga Springs, we have an interesting form of government where, we've got to have these 5 department heads. It's a little wacky. Typically, it is through a city attorney's office, and you'll have a records access officer that sits in the city attorney's office. They will get the records, apply redactions that they wish to apply, and then maybe the city attorney or the chief executive officer would be the appeals officer. That's usually how it goes. I'm not sure exactly what Saratoga Springs does. Who's actually getting a look at the documents, who's actually doing the searches. I think it's kind of an all hands on deck approach, from what I understand. But one thing I always harp on with these is those exceptions are not required. You don't have to withhold interagency communications. You don't have to withhold draft legislation. You can, but you don't have to. So I always look at these things and I say, why? I look at these municipalities that, Saratoga Springs sometimes fitting the bill, where the policy is maximum redaction, maximum withholding. Why? Well, who is that serving? I mean, is there something? If there's something that we don't want out, why don't we want it out? And maybe we should be doing something differently if we have a whole bunch of stuff that we don't want released.
Well, that's the thing. This is we're a small town. I know we think we're a big city, but we're a small town, and this is small town politics, and this is our local city council. These are people we know in the community. Transparency shouldn't be this difficult to achieve. It really should not. And I really do find it deeply concerning.
A lot of it, it's intuitive, but a lot of it can be confusing. I mean, you look at the open meetings law, and if you're not steeped in what this stuff is, you might, here we had a series of email votes, and they all thought it was perfect. Even the city attorney was endorsing it under the Kim administration.
And I can understand why there would be confusion around that, but there's no confusion when you're texting someone, hey, text me on this number, because no one will be able to see it.
Right. There's a difference. But what, I would, with open media, I mean, that's why I suggested a training course, because these are things that aren't always intuitive, and to learn about them is important as public servants. But you're right. There's a line where it crosses from permissible ignorance to, deliberate obstruction and maliciousness. And, that's it's very concerning when it crosses that line.
We have a couple of comments that have been coming in. One is from Matthew Taylor. He says, a complete violation of the public trust. This may only be a violation of the law, but it is egregious for any public official to blatantly lie, to deny the public documents and information that is the public's. Yeah, I mean, I agree.
Fair comment, yeah.
John Kaufman said, where is town law firm who drafted this? Did the town law firm write the short-term rental stuff?
It's my understanding that they did, that we spent a few $1,000s to get the first draft, and then re-upped it to do the second draft. I don't know what they've done. I mean, this thing's still got a typo in it that it had a month ago, and I emailed the council about the typo. It's still there. I mean, it's just silliness with this thing. Yeah. I don't know who drafted it. Whoever drafted it shouldn't have let it out the door.
Yeah. I agree. Well, listen, Mike, we love having you on. Thank you so much for, weighing in on this stuff. I could probably sit here and talk to you all afternoon about what goes on in City Hall, but I know that you have a job to get back to and a family to get back to. So we will let you go, but I appreciate you coming on and chatting with us.
Sounds good, guys. Thanks for having me on. Anytime.
Good to see you, Mike.
Thanks. So Adam, I want to do a quick pivot, if that's all right with you, and then we can kind of go back to the council meeting.
Sure.
One of the happy moments at the Tuesday City Council meeting was talking about the participatory. I don't know why I have such a hard time enunciating that.
There's a lot of syllables in that word.
I know. Budgeting committee, who just went through their third cycle of projects that were proposed to the city. And we have with us Norah Brennan, who is the chair of the Participatory Budgeting Committee and was at the Tuesday council meeting to go over all the projects that they have kind of greenlit for residents to, talk about, discuss, and decide what they hope
to vote on, right? There's
yeah.
Residents can vote.
So Norah, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. This is a great opportunity. Always excited to talk about participatory budgeting. So thank you for the opportunity.
So for people who don't know, could you give like a quick kind of just overview of what participatory budgeting is?
Yes. So participatory budgeting was first developed in Brazil, I think in 1989, and it was initially developed as a program to address poverty-related issues in some of the cities in Brazil. And the idea was that it was direct democracy opportunity. We're going to give the residents of this community a fund of dollars to be able to determine how to spend, what is working best for their neighborhood. If you live somewhere, right, do you not know what's going to be best, what's most important? And it grew from there and then becomes something that we see. Cambridge, Massachusetts is one of the greatest examples in the United States. They've been doing it, I think, 9 or 10 years now. Greenfield, North Carolina, Rochester, New York. There's a lot of places where it's been done. And so when Commissioner Sangvi first came into office, this is one of the first things that she talked about. I was so geeked about it because I already had heard participatory budgeting and I love this idea of saying, let's do this. So I put my hand up and said, let's get going. And so what happened was she got the city council at the time to approve, I believe it was 0.25% of the city's budget could be allocated towards projects that were submitted by residents of the community, of the city, and then voted on by residents. And so this is the third cycle that we've been doing this. We have a $100,000 budget this year, and actually more projects for the first time, more projects than we have money, which is exciting because it adds a bit of competition to it and saying what are things that people really feel is most important, would add the most value to the city.
And I just think it's cool that people, more and more people are coming up with ideas and proposals, and it's really catching on and growing as a concept in the city.
Exactly. Yeah.
Just based on these submissions. So can you walk us through some of I have a screenshot here, but that's kind of little, but can you walk us through some of the things that are being proposed so we can give kind of people a sense of what we're looking at?
Yeah, absolutely. There were a ton of great proposals, and some of them don't make it through because one of the realities of what we can do is what we learned in the very first cycle is sidewalks are expensive. So there are needs for sidewalks.
So expensive.
It's ridiculous.
Anything having to do with like road work and pavement is like so it's shocking how expensive it is.
Yeah, adding because I think I came in initially and I was like, oh my gosh, I got a list of like 47 different things that I would love to see happen, and every single one of them is way more expensive than the budget that we have to work with. And so, we've had to reset expectations, and it's a learning opportunity. So every year we get some really great ideas. These are all the different proposals that were submitted. We work with the committee to vet them out, and we work with the different city departments to figure out what's actually feasible for the city to deliver or the city to support versus it doesn't mean it wasn't a great idea. It's just not necessarily a fit for PB. It might be something that a nonprofit could do. It could be something we've referred things to the library or to even the capital budget. So a couple of things that are on the budget this year that I'll call out is the Pitney Meadows Community Compost. So we do open it up for ideas coming from nonprofits as well as from individuals. And definitely we get great ideas from both directions, but we've got a lot of local community organizations who are really who have membership that helps them say, this is something that would be great. So the community compost, it's a $30,000 project, but what this will do is enable people who are looking to do composting can do it directly in the city at Pitney Meadows and bring in their composting. So that's a great program.
A lot more appealing than figuring out how to do like home composting.
Yes.
For me is like, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I have a compost pile, but I'm like, okay, now what? Right? It's just there. So, and I know, there have been courses and stuff that people put on, but having some place where I know it's going to be used for community gardens and for stuff, for the work that they do at Pitney Meadows is a great way to make sure that I'm doing something useful, and it's right there. It's not something I have to go seek out. Saratoga Joinery, so they're a new organization in our community, and they submitted a project to be able to offer educational programs on basic tool knowledge and home repair. So this will be
so cool, by the way. And they're
right.
I can reach across my window right now and like touch them. They're my neighbor across the street, and
yeah,
I think what they do is like so amazing. But this specific course too is like something I would sign up for in like a heartbeat.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I've tried. I mean, there are some things that I've fixed and there are some things I've tried to fix, and show, being able to learn what to do with these tools, what's the right tool to use, home repair, setting up these courses is definitely a great thing. Obviously, the entire community can't use it, but there's definitely people in our city who will get value out of this and hopefully be able to share that knowledge elsewhere.
Actually, but scratch that. I would send my husband. I know how to do things. My husband needs to go.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. We divide and conquer. One of the other ones that I'm trying to think, what else
one of the ones that was really cool was the plaque in
yes.
Can you talk about that? Because there's such a range of things, and I thought this was really interesting.
Yeah, and this is something that came to us from an individual who had identified that there was a Sons of Spanish American War Veterans, a plaque that was lost in the 2018 City Hall fire. And during the renovation, the plaque got lost or misplaced or something, and then it was ruined and needs to be refinished and improved. So when City Hall rebuilding was done, renovation was done, it wasn't put back in place. And so this person who identified this and submitted this project to be able to have the plaque renovated and improved so that it could hang again back in City Hall.
And the city still has the original plaque?
Yes. I think it was a replacement. I think we lost because we actually worked with some of the city departments to see if we could find it somewhere. Because it may still be there somewhere, but they weren't able to. So it's a replacement.
We need a plaque. We had a plaque. We need to
exactly. And so it's just replacing the one that we had previously. But that's the kind of thing, you lose sight of, stuff happens, right? And so being able to replace that, it's a great way to be able to honor those veterans, bring that back into visibility for the community. And it's being added to City Hall. So everybody in the community will be able to benefit from having that, and I say benefit because some people go, well, what's my benefit? Right. But that this is part of what we do in our community is create these recognitions of people who are part of our community who did something in the past that we want to honor. And so
the historical contributions, are recognized all throughout the city in various ways. And I think it's really important that we maintain those. And I'm so glad that this person realized that this had happened. And I really hope that it's something that gets funded.
Let me ask you a question that, for people who say, listen, this, times are tight, the budgets are tight. What value added does this system of a participatory budget give you, as opposed to just leaving this $100,000 in the general operating fund? Why does this add value to our city? This program that the commissioner, what you've worked very closely with us, you're a big fan. How would you sell to the rest of Saratoga why this is so important?
So I will tell you why it's really important to me and why I think the value is here is because, we elect our officials to make these decisions, to say, this is what we need to do with our budget. This is the best way of distributing these funds. But ultimately, they're acting on our behalf. These representatives are making these decisions for us. What this does is create a direct line from my idea to that elected official and then to vote on it, right? So the residents of the community, everybody can come out and vote and say, you know what, this is dumb. I don't want to do this. I think this is a terrible project. We shouldn't do it. There's an opportunity for people to raise their voice and say one way or the other, whether they like it or not. But this is direct democracy in action. This is how I see it. This is the community members or community organization saying this will add value to our community and sharing that to that elected official who's then giving everybody the opportunity to weigh in through the vote. So to me, it is another way of giving them inputs to the decision they'd be making anyway. right? If Anita had $100,000 to decide what to do and said, well, I could do this or that, it's all going to be based on what people tell her is needed.
Also, cutting out the
middleman for a sec, Adam.
Yeah.
Because like what I think is so cool about this is that, you know, if this $100,000 went elsewhere in the budget, I listened to all the budget workshops, you know, everybody wants more money. So it could be put in someone else's line, but it wouldn't really, people wouldn't feel the impact in any substantial way if it was put into, you know, various budgets that are multi-millions of dollars. But having it be broken down like this and this wide range of projects, it touches all these different demographics and people who ordinarily wouldn't have necessarily this engagement with the city, from kids to seniors to people who are interested in composting to people who are interested in music. And like, it reaches a whole new kind of arena of people and gets them engaged with the city and making the community better in ways that maybe our legislators aren't seeing in their day-to-day, but people in their neighborhoods do see. And so I just think it's very cool.
One of the unintended benefits that I've seen in the 3 cycles that I've been a part of the committee as well is that this is another channel for people to say, hey, we'd like to see this done. Right. So we have moved things into the capital budget, and we have investigated what can and can't be done. So what, you know, I love everything that I've learned about that I didn't know about the community. You know, people have submitted project ideas for different parks. Not all of our parks are actually they may be maintained by the city, but they actually have to go through the school district to be able to get funding approved. And so it's a very complex process. So we've learned what works and what doesn't work, where there's actually limits to what the city can do with these funds and what we might need to go elsewhere to do. You know, somebody had submitted a project last year for adding water fountains downtown, right? For people, there's an environmental benefit for people, you know, not having to bring their own plastic bottles. There's, you know, water fountains make sense. It's actually, it's very costly to do that kind of thing. And, you know, moving the pipes and getting everything connected. What do you do in the wintertime? There's so many factors to that. And this is an education and also an opportunity to say, but it can't fit in participatory budgeting, but we're going to refer you to the DPW. So now DPW has a different channel of getting ideas of things that people are asking for, whether it's sidewalks, whether it's more lighting, you know, so we're bringing ideas forward and we're opening up that door for people to submit their ideas, whether it makes it our voting process or not, you know.
I was going to say, I'm sold. You got me. Now, how I'm interested. I want to get involved now. How do I go vote? How do I, you know, where do I look at the list of these projects and how do I go vote for them?
Yes. So we have a voting platform and starting this Saturday, we have a week of voting. So from December 7th to the 14th, thank you for putting up this flyer. There's a QR code here that you can scan. You can actually go in right now and look at the website where the voting happens and you can see what the projects are. You can pick and choose because we have this thing called knapsack voting. So you have a $100,000 budget and you can actually pick you can pick as many projects as can fit in that $100,000. And that's how we'll get your ranking and we'll understand what your priorities are as a voter. So starting December 7th, go in there, scan the QR code or go directly to the website. I'll post that the link in the comments.
Oh, thank you.
Directly to the site because people can go around and play and it, you know, so it's very straightforward. And then once we complete that week of voting, then we'll tally up all of the votes and be able to make the recommendations to Manita and say, this is what came through. These are the top voted projects that fit. And then she will make the presentation to the city council who will make final approval on submitting those, getting those projects approved to move forward to be implemented in 2025.
I think it's so cool, the knapsack kind of concept of because it really puts actually people through kind of like their own little mini budget workshop. Because it's like, I want this, that, and the other. And you're like, oh crap, it's too much money. So I got to like get rid of something. What am I going to get rid of? I just think it's such a cool addition this cycle. And I have to say that last year you guys funded the Lake Avenue Elementary School Centennial Celebration. And all my 4 kids have gone to Lake Avenue. I still have a kid at Lake Avenue.
My kids too.
Yeah. And it's so awesome. And it was such a great event. And I don't know how we would have pulled it off were it not for the money we got from the city. And so it was just, something we'll all remember for a really long time. And thanks to this program. So I just wanted to kind of give it a little shout out and a thank you for that.
Yeah, I will absolutely say that one of the greatest things, the things I like about the projects that we've brought through in past cycles is the free programming that's aimed towards children or to community members. So Opera Saratoga, we did Broadway in the park, and all these things that we were able to bring arts programming and make that available to kids who might otherwise not get the opportunity to experience those things. And that's, I think, one of those things that says when we look at Saratoga Springs and what makes it a place not only for people to be raised here, but to stay here and to develop their lives here, it's having the opportunity and the access to things that maybe they wouldn't get elsewhere. There was also the one, my favorite too, is there was a curling program, a pilot that we did in the very first cycle. And my family's a curling family. So I always thought curling was the greatest thing. We were able to, the National Curling Association actually donated the equipment so that we could be able to establish a pilot program. And there's now a curling that the recreation department is bringing back year over year to be able to open up curling groups. And so part of this is also, it's a one-time thing. You're submitting a project that's going to be implemented in 1 year, but hopefully some of the projects that we're building we'll see the benefits of it continue year over year.
Yeah. That is, that's so cool. And our co-host who's missing today, Dan DiFederici, he had to work. Thanks, Dan. He is a big fan of the curling. So we have heard about the curling program. He loves it. And he thought it was awesome.
Yep.
So this is so great. Like, thank you so much for coming on, Norah, and kind of talking through this, because I really think that, it's just growing and these things are all so exciting. And I really look forward to voting myself and then seeing what's funded.
Yeah. And then absolutely, encouraging people, think about what you want, what you think the city should be doing. Again, every idea is a good idea. So submit your ideas. That doesn't mean it's going to make it through. It doesn't mean it was a bad idea. It just means it's not a good fit for us, but we really want to see all those ideas. I want every year to see more projects come through for more work for the committee. And also if anybody's interested in volunteering to join the committee, we can always.
Most fun committee to be on. Like, of all the committees, I would say this one would be like the most gratifying and enjoyable.
Yes,
to be honest with
you. Absolutely.
Your sister
is yes.
I know that.
That's right. Yeah, your sister's fantastic, and we've got a lot of really great members. Some of us have been there for the full 3 years. Some we've had come in and out over various cycles, and it is good. And it's really, I think we're always excited about spreading the word, about getting more ideas, about really building this and making this something that isn't specific to a single commissioner, right? Yeah. If Manita, moves on, decides to, run for higher office and gets elected somewhere else and moves on, decides not to stay, this is a program I'd really like to make a case to say there's value in keeping this in the city.
Yeah, I completely agree. I completely agree. So thank you so much. And we will make sure we continue to reiterate to people to vote this starting Saturday. And you have to be resident. You have to be 18 or older, correct?
18. Yep. It's an honor system thing. It's not an electoral vote. So you just go in and you fill out your information and say, yes, I'm a member of the city or a resident of the city and I'm over 18, and go in and make your picks. But yeah, I sent the link in the private chat. I couldn't get into the comments. So you can definitely just pass that on. And
I know that at my house, I brought it up at the dinner table and proposed it to the kids and was like, what do you guys think? What do you want to do? What should we vote for? And it was like such a fun conversation to have with them and hear their thoughts on what was being proposed. And so anyway, I could gush on and on, but
so could I.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Norah. I know you're super busy and we really appreciate it. So thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah,
absolutely.
You, Norah.
Yeah, thank you both. I really appreciate it. And yes, everybody vote.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. Thanks. Have a great day.
You too. All right, my friend. Should we do we're almost up on an hour, but I want to do a hard pivot back to the city council meeting so we can kind of wrap up that recap.
Yeah.
Because you had a public comment. So I did have a public comment. So basically, I'll make a long story short. I was listening to a pre-agenda meeting. It was not Mondays, but it was 2 Mondays ago. And a gentleman made a public comment that was very innocuous. And it was like kind of observations about the budget and that people in Saratoga really expect a lot from their city in terms of services and kind of benefits and frills and perks. And we're willing to pay for them. And so he was kind of making the point that there's obviously, people want everything, but it has to be funded. There has to be money for it. And so he was making the point that raising taxes a little bit, he thought would be something that Saratogians would be cool with if it meant they could continue having access to all these services and benefits, et cetera. Totally innocuous. He finished talking, and this is what Commissioner Moran said in response.
Say to him, I'm very resentful of the fact that you think you speak for the taxpayers of Saratoga Springs, sir. You do not. You do not. You don't live here. You're not from here. So stop.
So that's where his comment ended. So I was horrified when I heard that, because to say to someone, you don't live here, you're not from here, so stop, is contrary to every policy, rule, and regulation we have about the public comment period. Your residency has no bearing on whether or not you can come and speak at public comment. Where you were born has no bearing on whether or not you can come speak at public comment. There's virtually no requirement. Anyone who, in my opinion, anyone who experiences the city can come and speak up in public comment about whatever it is they experience, whatever it is they want to say, and shouldn't have to be concerned about one of the city council members telling them, well, you're not from Saratoga Springs, so like shut the fuck up and get out of here. And so I just thought it was something that needed to be addressed because, especially at a time when we're really under a lot of scrutiny, that's not something that should be said and left uncorrected. So I went to public comment. I basically asked for clarification on the rules for the public comment period for pre-agenda versus city council meeting, because I was confused at this assertion that Commissioner Moran made and why he could say something like that, because it seemed to me that it was contradictory of our rules that pertain to public comment. I could not get through my comment, however, because when I quoted Commissioner Moran verbatim to the council, he immediately interrupted me and started saying that I was essentially lying about what he said. And then he said, it doesn't matter how I edit it, I'm not going to be able to kind of accuse him of what I'm accusing him of. And I was shocked, because you're not supposed to interrupt people when they're making a public comment and fight with them from the city council table. You have an opportunity to respond at the end of the public comment period, which everyone uses, but Commissioner Moran clearly lacks the self-control to contain himself until he has that opportunity. And then also to say that I was lying about what he said, I mean, I had my phone right there and I was like, do you want me to play the video right now? I can play the clip right now. This is exactly what you said. An insinuation that I could somehow edit the video from the pre-agenda and splice it together to make it sound like he'd said this when he really hadn't is just absurd. And again, I'm a constituent. I understand that he has a lot of personal animus towards me, but that shouldn't affect my experience when I come in to make a public comment. You shouldn't be, again, worried that a council member is going to accuse you of freaking lying and try to shut you down while you're making the comment. It was totally inappropriate in my opinion.
Yeah, I'll play devil's advocate here for a second. I think what he was trying to say was the gentleman said he speaks for the taxpayers. If you live in Saratoga, you are not a taxpayer. But I'm going to take it one step farther. I'm going to say if you're not from this city, that you should say second fiddle on public comment. I didn't like it when BLM was taking over our meetings. I don't like non-Saratoga residents taking over city council meetings. So this is our city, the residents, the taxpayers should get priority in the speaking at city council meetings. And
so
these outsiders can submit an email.
So you're going to say, when people walk in the door, show me your license. Where do you live? Do you rent or do you own? Oh, you rent? Forget it. See you later. You're not
No, if
paying
you
tax.
rent, it's okay. If you have a valid lease, unless it's a Skidmore. If you're from Skidmore, you don't get to speak either, because I'm sick of hearing those kids speak too. So only Saratoga residents can speak. Non-Skidmore students, a year lease. They don't have to own land. We don't have to go there.
I mean, Jesus Christ, oh God, I can't. I just don't even know where to go with that. I mean, I can't. I'm at, when I was public safety commissioner and someone called with a complaint, if I said to them, okay, before I hear your complaint, please tell me where you live and if you own or rent or whatever.
I will say I've never seen, I mean, the amount of abuse that the city council took when you were on it, and then Commissioner Montagnino from non-city residents was,
you know what?
It was despicable.
I never lost my temper.
It was, you never did. You never told them anything about their residency or their ability to speak.
I sat down, I shut my mouth, and I fucking listened. Excuse my language. I listened to what their concerns were, because that's the job of a public servant. It's to sit there and listen. And Commissioner Moran has a real problem with talking too much and listening not enough, too little. And, he's got to stop. I mean, honest to God, he has like this pattern of when anyone poses a question, whether it has to do with his department or not, he jumps in because he wants to answer everything. And I mean, these meetings are long because he bloviates too much. But anyway, I digress. I thought it was a completely inappropriate thing to say, and I thought it needed to be called out. In doing so, he acted completely inappropriately again. He's having a bad week. That is for sure. And he's, his actions, his potential actions, he's presumed innocent until found guilty. But the charges that were brought against him.
What's going to be interesting? Who's going to defend him for this? Because if you look, if you go back to the history is the charter says public servants get defended for not for criminal matters. And this theoretically is a criminal matter, right? So the charter to say the city doesn't pay for and this goes back to, let's bring up Commissioner Golub, right? So Commissioner Golub, we'll try to get this in quick. Commissioner Golub got in trouble, similar charges as far as violations. These aren't violations are the same as a speeding ticket, but for having Joe O'Neill, theoretically, I think it's the case, or having somebody from the DPW go to his house on the city dime, on the city clock, and do something as simple as put Drano down a sink. And these are some our city's getting some attention right now for these minor infractions that, while on the surface they're minor, it's definitely not nothing.
Well, and I think that Commissioner Moran was actually very public in trying to defend Commissioner Golub's actions, but in doing so, he kept reaffirming that had indeed happened, but it shouldn't be a big deal, and this is all politically motivated. But I just kept thinking, by confirming that this happened and trying to defend Commissioner Golub, he's not really helping. You know what I mean?
I do, because at the end of the day, I've known public servants who, I mean, you have to, once you're dealing with the taxpayers' dollars, you have to watch every penny, and you have to treat it not like it's your money, not like it's your penny. And there was why it was minor. I think you're right, saying this is not a big deal. He just slipped a little bit. It's not a big deal. It kind of is a big deal.
I personally think that should have been handled by HR, and I don't quite understand why it rose to the level of a police department and, an investigation, et cetera. But I know Commissioner Golub extremely well, and I feel like I know his character, and I think he's an incredible guy and a man of integrity. And so I give him the benefit of the doubt on this one. But I think that what's being, what Commissioner Moran is being accused of, it seems a lot more cut and dry. I mean, just that text message alone is incredibly damning. But Commissioner Moran is someone who espouses, transparency, and he espouses kind of all these virtues that he seemingly is contradicting in his day-to-day work at City Hall. So we'll see how it all plays out. We shall see how it all plays out. But at the end of the day, man, these lawsuits, it seems like every day, new lawsuit, new lawyers, new this, new that.
Yeah, we were talking earlier real quick. We're not that far away from candidates in petitioning season and knowing who's going to be running. And, for local political junkies like us, it's almost like finding the two teams for the Super Bowl. And again, we're February, right? We're going to start to find out.
Yeah. So our city council elections happen in about a year, in this coming November 2025. But the process for getting candidates endorsed by the Democrats or the Republicans really we start talking about it now. And then in January, it's discussed, there's meetings. And in February, the endorsements are made. March 1, petitioning starts. And so, yeah, it's happening now.
Right.
And it's really interesting. I believe that Mayor Safford is going to be running again.
That's unofficial though, right?
I mean, he told me. He told you
he was going to run again.
And it seemed like it was in a way that wasn't like on the down low. So I feel pretty comfortable saying that. Yeah.
Right.
And he told me that on Monday. I asked him on Monday if he was planning on running again, and he said yes. And then I don't know about Commissioner Songby, because I know she said when she was running for her state Senate seat that she was not planning on running again for the finance commissioner position, but I don't know if that's still the case. Commissioner Cole, I believe, plans to run again. I'm sure Commissioner Moran plans to run again, but I think that, especially with Commissioner Moran, because of all the shitstorms around him, I'm sure that there will be someone challenging him in the fall, and I'm sure there will be challenges to a lot of these seats.
Yeah, the Republicans did not run with a full deck, and they still did very well. And so it's going to see if it encourages some more Republicans, because it's tough. It's just on the blanket and the enrollment numbers. It's not easy to get a Republican elected.
Yeah, the problem is the Democratic City Committee is a stone cold pack of weirdos. They are just kind of a hot mess. I'm just going to say it. They're a little bit of a hot mess, and so it's hard when you don't have, in my opinion, two functional, healthy, productive committees, nominating people. But you and I are also in the group that's called One Saratoga, which is a group that was formed in 2019 and adheres to the kind of motto of city above party. And it's something that I think in this city is extremely important. I don't want people who are running to then report back to their party and do what their party is asking them to do in office. I want people running who are going to make decisions that are in the best interest of the city and not in the best interest of Republicans or Democrats. And so I believe we will, likely have another ballot line this election cycle. We had one the last election cycle. And in the last election cycle, it was really the One Saratoga line that put people over the finish line in terms of winning. And it really validated the concept that if you have a major party line and you have the One Saratoga line, you're going to win. So I think that the One Saratoga endorsements are going to be incredibly important for these folks.
I think so too.
Yeah. And we're in charge. I'm not really. We're part of the group that's in charge. Yeah. So on that note, can I just say a little cheer and jeer here to wrap up?
Yeah.
I'm cheering the Bills because they gave me great joy on Sunday. It was a freaking awesome game, and we need some happy news in New York State, and the Bills continue to deliver that happiness for me.
Jets and Giants.
Yeah. On the jeer side, our former mayor, Ron Kim, has been active on Facebook lately. And I happened to be reading a post that was about the proposed salary increases for the city council that Commissioner Songby put up. And in this post, Ron Kim, our former mayor, refers to John Safford as Sleepy John. And I just thought, what a dick. Like, what a shitty thing to say. You know what I mean? Like, it just reminded me what a jerk he is and how happy I am.
Trumpian tones to that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, of course, Sleepy Joe. And he's like, oh, does he think it's funny to say Sleepy John? Like, I just thought it was gross and unbecoming of a former mayor.
Interesting, coming out of the Democratic Party too.
Yeah. And he's talking, he was just the mayor and he's talking about the current mayor. It's just gross. Like, we deserve better in terms of the discourse from our former and current elected officials. Yeah. So Ron Kim, stop being an asshole.
All right. My cheers.
Yeah. What you got?
All right. My jeer is actually from my children, and it goes to the Saratoga Springs DPW for getting those roads cleared today and having school start on time. My kids are tired and pissed this morning.
We know.
My cheer goes to Saratoga Springs DPW for making my driving to work easy and comfortable for getting those roads clear. So I guess it's all perspective.
Yeah, that is funny. No, my kids were like dying for like maybe a 2-hour delay.
Yeah, exactly. I was expecting. I was shocked, but they made me sleep with a spoon under my.
Yeah, my kids did that too. They're like, you put ice.
I think we got underwear somewhere in a freezer or something. I don't know.
Yeah, there was like a white crayon under the pillow, ice in the toilet, and then something else, and that will that's a magical spell that makes a snow day happen. That's really funny. I was like, wait, what are we doing? I was totally confused.
Yeah.
But anyway.
All right. Well,
it was great chatting, Adam.
Yeah, we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Yes, absolutely. All right. Peace out.
Saratoga.